It is July. Somewhere in Phoenix, Arizona, a retired schoolteacher named Linda is sitting in her kitchen at 11 in the morning. The temperature outside is 114 degrees. Her air conditioner, a Carrier unit installed in 2006, has been running without a single breakdown for 18 years. This morning it stopped cooling. She calls an HVAC technician. He arrives within 2 hours. He finds the problem in 7 minutes. The compressor has a slow refrigerant leak. The fix is straightforward. He needs to top off the system with R22 refrigerant, the same gas that has been running this unit, reliably, for nearly 2 decades. Then he pauses. He looks at her. And he says the same thing that thousands of HVAC technicians across the country are saying every single day in the summer of 2024. Ma'am, the refrigerant your system runs on is no longer manufactured in the United States. I can get it, but it's going to cost you. Linda asks how much. The technician tells her the refrigerant alone will cost between $800 and $1,200. For a top-off. Not a new unit. Not a compressor. For the gas. The same gas that was $30 a pound 5 years ago. Linda's air conditioner still works perfectly. Her compressor is fine. Her coils are clean. Her ductwork is intact. The only thing wrong with her 18-year-old system is that the gas it runs on was made illegal to produce in America, and the companies that lobbied hardest for that ban hold the patents on every viable alternative. This is not a coincidence. This is the refrigerant trap. The story of R22 refrigerant is not a story about the ozone layer. It is not a story about environmental protection. It is a story about how a regulation, written with the right words, in the right places, at exactly the right time, can function as a market transfer mechanism. A mechanism that moves billions of dollars from working-class homeowners and independent HVAC technicians into the balance sheets of Honeywell International and the Chemours Company. And the most important part of that story is what most people never see. The mechanism was not hidden. The patents were filed in public. The lobbying disclosures were submitted on time. The rule changes were published in the Federal Register. Everything was done in the open. Because when a system is designed correctly, when the capture is complete before anyone knows to look, you don't need to hide anything. You just need to make sure the story that gets told is the one about the ozone layer. Not the one about the patents. Today we are going to tell the one about the patents. To understand the trap, you have to understand what you lost. R22 is a hydrochlorofluorocarbon refrigerant. Its chemical name is chlorodifluoromethane. It has been used in residential and commercial air conditioning systems since the early 1960s. It worked. That is the starting point, and it is the most important fact in this entire documentary. R22 worked extraordinarily well for the job it was designed to do. It has a boiling point of -41 degrees Fahrenheit at atmospheric pressure, which makes it ideal for the refrigeration cycle that cools the air in your home. It is chemically stable. It is non-toxic at normal exposure levels. It is non-flammable. For 40 years, it was the universal standard for residential air conditioning in the United States. Every major manufacturer built their systems around it. Every independent HVAC technician in America was trained on it. Parts were universally available. The supply chain was established and competitive. By 2000, there were multiple domestic producers of R22 keeping prices low through competition. Honeywell, DuPont, Mexicham. A pound of R22 refrigerant cost the HVAC technician somewhere between $8 and $12 at wholesale. The homeowner paid for labor, not the gas itself. A refrigerant top-off on a residential system was a $200 service call. And then something happened. Not a mechanical failure. Not a safety incident. Not a consumer demand shift. A treaty. In 1987, the United States signed the Montreal Protocol, an international agreement to phase out chemicals believed to be depleting the stratospheric ozone layer. Chlorofluorocarbons were the primary target. R22, as a hydrochlorofluorocarbon, was placed on a phase-down schedule. The schedule was long, gradual, designed, in theory, to allow the market to adapt. The original U.S. implementation timeline under the Clean Air Act gave the industry decades. Production caps would tighten slowly. There would be time to develop alternatives. There would be time for infrastructure to evolve. That was the plan. Then the timeline began to change. And the companies holding patents on the alternatives began lobbying harder. Let us be precise about the regulatory history, because precision is where the story lives. The EPA implemented the Montreal Protocol's requirements for R22 through a series of rulemaking actions under the Clean Air Act. In 2003, the EPA published its first major R22 phase-down rule. New air conditioning equipment manufactured after January 1, 2010 could no longer use R22 as a primary refrigerant. That was a reasonable rule. It said, going forward, build new equipment with a different refrigerant. It did not say, destroy the existing installed base. There were approximately 100 million R22-based air conditioning systems in American homes and commercial buildings at the time. Those systems were explicitly allowed to continue operating. R22 could continue to be manufactured and imported for use in servicing those existing systems. That is what the rule said. What happened next is where the story diverges from the version you have been told. In 2010, the EPA issued additional rulemaking that tightened the production and import allowances for R22 on an annual basis through a cap-and-trade system. Each year, less R22 was allowed to be produced or imported. Each year, the price crept upward as supply tightened artificially. This was not an accident of the regulatory process. This was the mechanism. Because as the supply of R22 tightened, every homeowner with an existing R22 system faced a binary choice. Pay the escalating cost to maintain a system that still functioned perfectly, or pay to replace the system entirely with equipment running the new refrigerants whose patents were held by the companies that had been lobbying for exactly this timeline. Let that structure sit with you for a moment. The regulation did not phase out R22 because R22 systems failed. The regulation phased out R22 because functioning R22 systems represented 100 million potential replacement sales that could only be realized if the existing systems became too expensive to maintain. The final production ban took effect January 1, 2020. From that date, no new R22 could be manufactured or imported into the United States for any purpose. The only legal source of R22 for servicing the tens of millions of systems that still operated was reclaimed refrigerant, gas recovered from decommissioned equipment, reprocessed, and resold. Supply became finite. The price went vertical. In 2012, a pound of R22 cost HVAC technicians approximately $10 at wholesale. By 2018, it was $40 a pound. By 2021, it was $60 to $80 a pound. By 2023, reclaimed R22 was trading at over $150 a pound on the spot market. That is a 15-fold increase in 11 years. For the same gas. Performing the same function. In the same equipment. Linda's air conditioner did not change. The market around it was restructured. Now we get to the part of this story that most people never see. Because you cannot understand the R22 phase-out without reading the patent filings that preceded the lobbying that shaped the phase-down timeline. Here is what the patent record shows. Honeywell International, then operating its specialty chemicals division before its partial spin-off into Resideo Technologies, filed patents on R410A, the primary replacement refrigerant for residential air conditioning, beginning in the late 1980s and continuing through the 1990s. R410A is a blend of two refrigerants, R32 and R125. Honeywell held key patents on the production process, the blending specifications, and the handling characteristics of this mixture. DuPont, which later spun off its chemical business as the Chemours Company, held complementary patents and was a co-developer of R410A under the trade name Suva 410A. Together, Honeywell and DuPont effectively controlled the intellectual property that made R410A the mandated replacement for R22 in new residential equipment. These patents were filed before the EPA finalized its accelerated phase-out timeline. The sequence matters enormously. Patent protection is secured. Then the regulatory timeline that makes those patents commercially necessary is shaped through lobbying. Then the regulation is enacted. Then the patents become worth billions. This is not speculation. The patent filing dates are public record. The lobbying disclosure filings are public record. The EPA rulemaking comment letters, including those submitted by Honeywell and DuPont, are public record. In 2009, Honeywell and DuPont submitted detailed technical comments to EPA rulemaking proceedings that specifically advocated for an accelerated phase-down of R-22 production allowances. They argued that the existing timeline was too slow. They argued that faster elimination of R-22 was necessary for environmental protection. They did not mention that faster elimination of R-22 meant faster mandatory adoption of the refrigerant blends they had patented. The EPA adopted elements of the accelerated timeline. And then something else happened. Because R-410A was itself not the end of the story. R-410A has a global warming potential, the measure the EPA uses to evaluate refrigerant climate impact, of 2088. The EPA, responding to international pressure and domestic climate policy, began the regulatory process to phase down R-410A as well. The replacement refrigerant selected for the next generation of residential equipment is R-454B, sold under the trade name Opteon XL41. The primary patent holder on R-454B is Chemours, the DuPont spin-off. Honeywell holds key patents on the alternative candidate, R-32. The two companies that captured the R-22 replacement market are the same two companies positioned to capture the R-410A replacement market. The cycle is not a coincidence. It is the business model. Let us step out of the boardroom and into a service van. Because the story of the refrigerant trap is not only a story about patent portfolios and regulatory capture. It is a story about what happened to 37,000 independent HVAC service companies in America when the gas they built their businesses around became too expensive to use. Talk to any independent HVAC technician who has been in the trade for more than 15 years and you will hear the same story with different details. The business model of a small residential HVAC operation was built on service calls. A homeowner called. The technician came. The technician diagnosed the problem. The technician fixed it. Refrigerant top-offs were a significant part of that service revenue. The gas was cheap. The markup was modest. The customer was happy to pay a fair price for a system that continued working. That business model began breaking down around 2015. Not because the technicians became less skilled. Not because the equipment became harder to service. Because the refrigerant cost escalated to the point where a service call became a sales conversation. A technician shows up. The system is low on R-22. The top-off will cost the homeowner $800. The technician then has to explain that a new R-410A system, with a proper equipment installation, starts at $6,000 to $8,000. And now the technician is no longer a service provider. They are an equipment salesperson. The entire economics of the small service shop shifted toward replacement. Because replacement was the only transaction where the margin still worked. And replacement, here is the critical fact, predominantly benefits the large HVAC dealers, the manufacturer-affiliated service networks, and the financing companies that issue the loans for new equipment installation. It does not benefit the one-truck operation running out of a home garage in a small town who built his business fixing things. The small independent shops lost a core revenue stream. The large dealers and manufacturer service networks captured it. This is the part of the story the EPA's environmental impact assessments did not measure. They measured ozone depletion potential. They did not measure the market transfer from independent small businesses to consolidated dealer networks. They are different documents. And only one of them got written. There is a secondary market in R-22 that deserves its own examination. Because the reclaimed refrigerant market that emerged after the 2020 production ban is a market that was predicted by industry insiders, and has developed in almost exactly the way that benefits large consolidated players over small independent ones. Here is how reclaimed R-22 works. When an R-22 air conditioning system is decommissioned, because the equipment failed, or the homeowner chose to upgrade, or the building was demolished, the refrigerant inside it must be legally recovered rather than vented to the atmosphere. That recovered gas goes to certified refrigerant reclaimers who process it back to purity specifications. The reclaimed gas is then the only legal source of R22 for servicing systems still in operation. The reclaimers set the price. And the supply is finite and declining. Every decommissioned R22 system that gets replaced with R410A equipment removes some gas from the reclaim pool. As the installed base of R22 systems shrinks, the reclaim supply shrinks with it. As the supply shrinks, the price rises. As the price rises, more homeowners choose replacement over repair, which shrinks the installed base further, which reduces the reclaim supply, which raises the price again. This is not a market malfunction. This is a designed endpoint, a functioning market with a regulated sunset. The question is only, who captures the value as the market terminates? The answer is, not the independent technician, not the homeowner with a working system. The answer is the reclaim processing companies, dominated by large refrigerant distributors, and the equipment manufacturers who sell the replacement units. The homeowner is the exit mechanism. Their working air conditioner is the asset being harvested. If the R22 story ended with R410A, it would be a complete story. But it does not end there, because R410A is now itself in the early stages of the same phase-down process that eliminated R22. In December 2022, the EPA finalized its rules under the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act of 2020. These rules require the phase-down of hydrofluorocarbon refrigerants, including R410A, beginning in 2025. With reduction targets of 85% below historical baseline by 2036. New residential air conditioning equipment sold after January 1, 2025 must use lower global warming potential refrigerants. The primary replacement is R454B, Chemours Opteon XL41. The secondary option is R32, for which Daikin and Honeywell hold key intellectual property positions. Both of the options are patented. Both of the primary patent holders are the same companies that captured the R22 replacement market. The cycle is beginning again. And this time, the installed base affected is not the R22 systems that survived to 2020. This time, it is every R410A system installed in the last 15 years. Homes that replaced R22 equipment between 2010 and 2024, at significant expense, often financed, are now discovering that their R410A systems are beginning the same journey toward expensive to service, eventually discontinued refrigerant status. The homeowner who paid $8,000 for a new R410A system in 2015 is 10 years into a system that will face escalating refrigerant costs beginning in the late 2020s as the phase-down tightens supply. This is not speculation. The AIM Act phase-down schedule is published. The patent holdings are public record. The price trajectory of R410A in wholesale markets has already begun its upward move. The mechanism that was applied to R22 is being applied again, with the same companies in the same positions, collecting the same rents from the same homeowners, who do not know it is happening, because this time the story will be about climate, not patents. There is one more dimension of the next-generation refrigerant transition that deserves examination. Because R454B and R32, the refrigerants that will replace R410A in new residential equipment, are not equivalent to R22 or R410A in one critical respect. They are mildly flammable. The industry classification is A2L, lower flammability. R22 and R410A are classified A1, non-flammable. The change in flammability classification has real consequences for installation, service, and safety. It requires different handling procedures. It requires different equipment for recovery and recycling. It requires additional technician training and certification. And it creates a situation where the independent HVAC technician faces yet another capital investment in new equipment, in new training, in new certifications, simply to continue servicing the same homes they have serviced for years. The large dealer networks and manufacturer service organizations will absorb this cost at scale. The one-truck independent operator will absorb it personally. Some will not. Some will exit the trade. And the market will consolidate further toward the large service networks. This outcome was predictable. It was predicted by independent HVAC contractors in EPA comment letters submitted during the AIM Act rulemaking. Those comments are in the public record. The EPA acknowledged the transition costs. The rulemaking proceeded on its current timeline. The costs land where they always land. On the people doing the actual work. This is a story you have seen before. The structure of the refrigerant trap is not original. The mechanics, regulatory action creating captive markets, followed by patent capture of the alternatives, followed by consolidation of service revenue into manufacturer-controlled networks, are the same mechanics that drove the agricultural equipment industry's transformation. In 2015, John Deere argued in federal proceedings that farmers did not truly own their tractors because the software controlling the engine was proprietary. The physical machine was yours. The operational system was theirs. John Deere's certified technicians were the only people who could legally reset the software after a fault code. The farmer could fix the mechanical component. The tractor still would not start without the software unlock. This is the HVAC industry in 2024. The homeowner owns the air conditioning unit. The refrigerant it runs on has been regulated out of affordable existence. The replacement refrigerant system requires manufacturer-affiliated certification to service under the new flammability classifications. The homeowner owns the box. The system around the box is theirs. The John Deere fight had a name. People called it right to repair. Legislatures in multiple states began writing right to repair bills. The automotive industry faced its own version in Massachusetts. The HVAC industry has not yet faced a right to repair challenge of equivalent political force. And the reason for that is simple. Most homeowners do not know this is happening. They know their air conditioning bill went up. They do not know why. They do not know there is a name for it. They do not know there are patents involved. They do not know that the companies lobbying for the phase-out held the patents on the replacement before the phase-out timeline was accelerated. You know now, Linda in Phoenix eventually made a decision. She paid the $1,200 for the R22 top-off. Her air conditioner is running. For now. Her technician told her the truth. Every year that passes, the gas gets more expensive. At some point, and that point is coming, a service call will cost more than the price of a new system. That is when she will buy the new system. On financing. Carrying interest. For the equipment whose refrigerant is made by the company that lobbied for the timeline that made her old equipment too expensive to maintain. She will pay that debt for years. And she will never connect any of it back to the patent filings from the late 1980s. She will think her air conditioner wore out. She will think it was time for an upgrade. She will think she made a choice. The refrigerant trap is not a conspiracy theory. It is a business model. It uses real legislation, real patents, real lobbying, real regulatory timelines. All of it documented. All of it legal. All of it designed to produce a specific outcome. The conversion of a working, independently serviceable system into a mandatory replacement sale. Repeated. Every 15 years. With new patents each time. The question is not whether this is happening. The records prove it is happening. The question is what you do with a working system in the time between now and when they make it impossible to maintain. And the answer to that question is in the next section. Here is what the smart money in HVAC knows right now. First, if you have a functioning R22 system, keep it running as long as the economics make sense. A system with no leaks requires no refrigerant. Maintenance, coil cleaning, filter replacement, capacitor and contactor inspection, extends system life without touching the refrigerant. Have your system leak checked annually. A tight system is a system that does not need expensive gas. Second, understand the reclaim market. Reclaimed R22 is legal and available. The price varies by supplier and by season. Get multiple quotes before authorizing a refrigerant top-off. The spread between suppliers can be 30 to 50%. Independent refrigerant distributors, not manufacturer-affiliated dealers, typically offer better pricing. Third, if replacement becomes necessary, do not default to whatever the first contractor recommends. The transition to A2L refrigerant equipment is creating a window right now where R410A equipment, which is simpler to service, uses non-flammable refrigerant, and has a massive installed part supply, is being cleared at significant discounts as distributors move inventory ahead of the 2025 mandate changes. A high-efficiency R410A system purchased and installed in 2024 is a 15-year machine. The refrigerant phase-down will tighten supply eventually, but the infrastructure and technician familiarity with R410A is vastly greater than it will ever be for A2L systems. Fourth, know your technician. The consolidation pressure in HVAC is pushing independent operators out of the market. But the ones who remain are your best advocates. An independent technician with no manufacturer affiliation has no financial incentive to recommend replacement over repair. Find them before you need them. Fifth, understand the AIM Act rulemaking schedule and what it means for your next purchase decision. The phase-down of R410A is real, but it is a phase-down, not an immediate ban. Systems sold and installed today will have serviceable refrigerant available for their operational lifespans. The next trap is for the homeowners who buy R410A equipment after 2030, when reclaimed supply starts tightening. If you are buying new equipment now, understand what you are buying into. The refrigerant trap is designed to be invisible. The mechanism only works if you do not see it. You have seen it now, but if you want to understand how the systems around you are actually designed, not how they are described, not what the press release says, but what the patent filing says, what the lobbying disclosure says, what the rulemaking comment letter says, because the refrigerant trap is not the only trap. And the next one is already in the Federal Register.